Hi everyone, it's Connor, and I'm joined by my good friend, the host of the Heretics podcast, Andrew Gold, former BBC presenter, got cancelled. If you haven't seen his interview with Ian, or me actually, to plug it, you should. Andrew and I come at things from a very different stance. We both want the restoration of the country, peace and prosperity. But I wanted to ask you, as an attendee of ARC, you're hearing a lot from Ian, from myself, about how Christianity needs to be the substrate, the moral force behind our restoration. Now, you're good friends with Ian's other good friend, Richard Dawkins. They had a very famous debate. You had a very cordial chat with him, agree on him a lot. So, Andrew, make the case to me why we don't need Christianity as the moral force for restoration.
Well, you know what? I'm not sure I can make the case that we don't need Christianity. My case here is I don't believe in the stories. And I'm not entirely sure that you do. Or anyone does. That's the arrogance of me to make a point like that. And maybe you do. I'm sorry, I don't mean that. I just mean, I don't believe it.
Not to do with the Jordan, but what do you mean by believe?
What do you mean by believe? Well, worst Jordan Peterson impression ever. People do better ones. Well, that is Jordan's point, I guess. I can read bits of the Bible. I've never read it in its completion. I know about Jonah and the whale. He lived in a whale for some days and then got out. These stories, I know, did not happen. They couldn't have happened. They're absurd. However, there are teachings in the Bible that obviously have impacted on Western civilization and helped to make Britain what it is, in the Old Testament as well, Judeo-Christian values, that it appears, when are not being upheld by some sort of belief, disappear extremely quickly, and we're in a lot of trouble. So I understand Richard Dawkins in saying, I'm a cultural Christian. I went to a Christian school and we did all the Our Father who art in heaven stuff, and it didn't bother me. It felt like, okay, this is something we're all getting together to do. There are schools like mine now which have specific rooms for Islamic prayer now. Now, there's loads we can say about Islam, but the point is we now have lots of different tribes in the school, lots of different people, whereas when I was there were some Muslims and some Jews, mostly Christians or atheists or whatever they were, and we were all part of one thing coming together. That no longer exists, and I think that's very worrying.
So that's very interesting, because I remember when I was on your show, we had a bit of a back and forth. You play a very compelling devil's advocate. What it sounds like is a case for suspending disbelief in the absence of proof, almost submitting your personal doubts to the utility of a cultural myth. That's what I think Jordan might still be. Because have you read his latest book at all?
I think you told me a bit about it.
Yes, so throughout, he provides lots of definitions of God. You know, he says it's the paramount guiding principle. It's the spirit which humbles you when you take technology too far to enact your own pride and vanity, and Tower of Babel, etc. So he provides all of these metaphorical definitions, these mythical definitions from which you can extract moral principles. It was only recently in an interview on Diary of the CEO where he's asked, so was Jesus Christ the Son of God? He said yes. Before that, he made the case that it's a useful myth. It's something we can base our restoration on, and we don't have to fully believe in it, but we can still practice and live it out. Sounds like you're making a similar case. It's not the same case as C.S. Lewis, where he would have said, because these principles are true in all times and all places, therefore we must conclude that it is real and must have happened, versus them just being useful. Are you just saying it's useful, so even if we can't prove it, we should live as if it is true?
I think for the most part, yes. Where I have difficulty is Jordan also says we must live with truth. Truth is paramount, and you don't always know if you're going to go right or wrong. We're all going to use religious words, sin. We will all make mistakes, and we constantly do, and we change what we feel and all of those kinds of things. But we know that if we go with truth, we're more likely to stay on a righteous path. But it's not true that there was Jonah living in a whale. It is not true, as far as I'm concerned, that Jesus died and rose from the dead 3 days later. That's palpably impossible, untrue, and there's no evidence of it, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm not here to necessarily make a case, because I don't have one. I don't know what the best action is. All I can do is say, I think we're better with these Christian values. At the same time, I don't know if society should ever be lying to the masses or engaging in a false belief, because once you stop honouring truth, you've seen where that goes with wokeness. So I'm not saying anything of interest for your listeners. I wish I had something more conclusive, but part of what is important to me is to never be certain and to not be sure what the right thing is. I certainly think Christianity is a much better fit as something to hang our hat on than Islam by a million miles, and wokeness, 100%. Christianity in the past has not always been so friendly and nice and happy. The Inquisitions and things like that.
Well, we can maybe debate the merits of that. I mean, some of the Crusades are pretty good, but in terms of, some of the Jewish expulsions from Europe, there's some complexity there. I would say that that's Christianity applied improperly, but I think the problem is with Islam is when people take the Quran a little bit too seriously. But I think the point on truth is important. I would say that straying away from Christians valuing truth in and of itself as a moral good, rather than wokeness valuing power and saying there is no truth but power, only Christianity prevents, for example, the corruption of science in the service of power. And this would be my quibbling with someone like Richard Dawkins, who says that we can use science to derive truths, and from those truths we can build a new morality or a good way of life. What keeps you committed to the truth in the first place if you don't value it as a divine principle, would be my question.
Well, I want to go to what you said about the corruption of science, that Christianity prevents that, because Christianity has also in other times held back science by suggesting that the earth is the center of the universe, for example. That held back science and by some years. So Christianity often obscures and impedes science.
Well, Christian doctrine didn't say that. There was people in the institutions that were corrupting it. It's like the tithes, for example. The Catholic Church were wrong to levy those. That was not at all in the scripture. So human beings are incredibly fallible. But what keeps them honest is to value truth as an abstract principle that says, in order to live up to the divine example, you have to live in accordance with reality. Otherwise, you can run all sorts of scientific experiments to contort reality. It's like science without truth as a guiding principle leads to trans, for example. You're using the scientific apparatus to achieve an ideological goal without saying it's impossible for a man to become a woman. So do you think we need some sort of other moral guiding principle to constrain science, or can science provide us a new morality?
I think there's, and I spoke about this with you last time, I think there's an ingrained evolutionary incentive towards truth. Most people do tell the truth most of the time. It doesn't feel that way. I know there'll be groans, people listening to that, oh yeah, what about those politicians? But the reason that those stories make the paper is because they are relatively rare. Most people do opt for truth. And the reason for that is if you were in a tribe over hundreds of thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years ago, in some sort of tribe, and you lied too often, you would have been expelled from that tribe and probably would have died too quickly to pass on your genes. So it feels like there is some kind of biological imperative to be more honest more often than not. Sometimes you need not to be honest. There are occasions for that. The famous dilemma, I think Immanuel Kant said, it wasn't the Nazi, it was just a bad axe murderer, which later people started saying the Nazi at your door looking for a Jew. Should you be honest? Should you not? Kant says you should be honest. And he has some sort of ridiculous theory around, because if you lie, and so your person that you're harboring in your attic climbs out the window to escape just at the point when your inquisitor leaves, they might come upon one another in the street, and that guy gets killed, and it's your fault because you lied. That's absurd. Sam Harris says only a psychopath could actually endorse that level of truth. So it appears to me we've developed a good sense of when to be honest and when not to be, based on surviving over hundreds of thousands of years what has worked and what hasn't worked. So I don't think we need Christianity for that. However, I'm perfectly open to being wrong on this, and I'm seeing more and more when you've got 70 million, 80 million people from all different kinds of backgrounds, you do probably need some sort of guiding principle. So I know that's a very muddy, woolly answer, but maybe we do need some kind of morals and things like that. I just simply don't believe. And just as I don't believe a trans man can be a woman, I don't believe in any of the God stuff. And the more we learn about the universe, the more absurd it seems to me.
I mean, it's an honest answer, which is why I appreciate it. I think going on to the concept of tribes, first of all, we can see in Islam, if you don't value truth in the abstract because you don't believe that every single human being has the capacity for equal dignity under Imago Dei, and instead all that matters is advantaging your tribe, your global tribe, the Ummah, that means you can lie, cheat and steal in order to advance your family's interests, your religion's interests. So I think it's Christianity, yes, rooted in the Old Testament, particularly the New Testament, that values it externally. So I think that's important. But I wanted to move on to tribes because we've had this debate off air a few times. I know you've got it on an upcoming episode of your podcast, our mutual friend, Charlie Bentley Astor. So Fraser Nelson decided to go on trigonometry recently and say that if you were born in Japan, you would be Japanese. Or if you are, more specifically, born in Britain, then you are as indistinguishably British as myself. And we disagree over this. Why do you think that Fraser Nelson is correct on a civic nationalist identity?
Certainly, it's an unpopular position to take, but I'm happy to take it because I know on Twitter he was getting killed.
Mainly from me.
Mainly from you. But most people who go into battle with Constantine or you end up getting killed. Not all of us can think quickly enough to get those things right in the moment. Whereas Constantine, you, Katie Hopkins, who gave me a hard time the other day, some people are very quick thinkers and other people are quite slow and measured. And there are different ways to have these debates. I just think that you and Carl and maybe Constantine in that instance, your definition of what seems to be ethnicity, would that be right? Is that what we're talking about? Is too woolly to really be anything worthy of understanding our country or where we're going based on it. What is one's ethnicity? Well, what if you were to find out in 10 years that actually your DNA, so your race, you were adopted, you didn't know, and you're Polish, and your ancestry went back to Poland for hundreds of years? Would it make you less British? I imagine you'd say it would do. Right, well, how does...
Well, no, it would make me less English, because British is a legal distinction. And this is important because the British identity was created to bind the Celtic and the Anglo-Saxon nations together. And now it's being used after the waves of Blair, Cameron and Boris mass migration to become an umbrella identity to try and bind everyone that's been in Britain, whether they're first generation immigrants or second or third, under the umbrella of British values. All you need to do is sign up to the Scouts Pledge. They've even got 5 fingers in the education system of tolerance, respect for the rule of law, freedom of religion, free speech, these sort of, again, vague and woolly concepts in order to be indistinguishably British. My contention is that these things might be all fine and good, and they might actually be the particular property of the British people. That's why you've got the prefix British before values. But that means they belong to, one, a distinct people, the British, and two, if in the past those British people didn't abide by those values, are they now no longer British? Can you rob their identity from them?
That's why this is so complicated. So again, I know this is frustrating because I know on YouTube and on the online we're supposed to all come and go, no, this is right and that's right. I don't think there is an easy way, a catch-all way to say this is a group of these people with ethnicity. I mean, with race there certainly is, but ethnicity implies more than race, doesn't it? It implies a cultural brotherhood or something.
It's a chain of families in one particular place. Race is kind of an Americanism because, the Albanians are pretty white and I wouldn't want them governing me either. Do you know what I mean?
So where it gets difficult then is my family's, I think we've had 4 generations in the UK since maybe the 1800s. It might be 5 generations. We don't even know beyond that because it all got lost. I'm sure there were some bits, as you might be thinking, that got passed down from these Russians or Polish. I don't know where they're from. But in the last few generations, we don't do anything sort of Jewishy, really. Bits and pieces, okay? But the idea that I share something more with a Jew born in maybe Argentina or Russia than I do with non-Jewish people such as yourself born in the United Kingdom, to me is absurd. I wear my England shirt, I go to the England game, football, Spurs fan since I was a kid. I feel just English. There's no other country and while there are bits of Jewishness, of course there are some of those things, I have much more in common with the average English person than the average Jewish person from another country. So then where is my background? Where's my ethnicity? This is my issue with the woolly idea of ethnicity.
I think the concept of tribalism is actually a lot better here because people are more likely to buy into a culture if they feel it's theirs, right? And so if you've had families that have settled here over a long period of time, it's easier for some minorities, it seems, than the others, particularly the Jewish community that have settled in England for a few hundred years. They're more likely to identify with their inherited culture than necessarily their ethnic culture. But there are lots of ethnicities, especially in the age of mass migration, even second generation, as we've seen with polling from the Henry Jackson Society for radical beliefs to be more concentrated among second generation university educated British born Muslims. The idea that they will buy into their parents' host culture because the prefix British before British values doesn't make it feel like it belongs to them because their parents aren't British. So I think that even though ethnicity has no moral content, like nobody's better or worse than another person, in the Christian sense, nobody's more or less capable of moral dignity just because they're from a different place, it means that if they think they are of a people, they might not be of the inherited culture, and it makes them less likely to assimilate, because it might not matter to you and me, being a countryman or a neighbor or a good friend, but it matters to other civilizations whether or not they are from that place. So I think that means it's an important thing to understand, even if it has no moral weight.
Yeah, I think there's an argument for that. I get that, as long as we're always clear that it's too ambiguous. There are too many people. We've seen those TV shows where people traced their heritage and found out they were totally wrong, often those who cared most. Have you done one of the heritage tests?
I haven't, because I'd be up for it. The hesitancy I had is because the people that run the heritage organizations, I looked into them. One of them was owned like the sister of the CEO of YouTube, and they're researching eternal life in Silicon Valley. And I was like, I don't really want my DNA to be used to be fed into whatever IV drip is keeping Joe Biden shambling around the White House, but I'd be interested in doing it but for me, and this is why it doesn't have any moral content, for me, as far as I know, so my mum's side of the family are Irish, part of my dad's side are a bit French, and the rest of it's English. But like you, I've only ever known England, and my heart longs for at least the small vestiges, the pockets of this country that are very English when I go elsewhere. So a change in my perception of my heritage, if I found out that I was part Scandinavian or something, wouldn't change how English I identified. But for a lot of other people, particularly Gen Z, or the most diverse generation we've ever had, who say I wouldn't fight for this country, we have to understand it's because they don't feel that it is their country, their culture, because they feel that their ethnicity ties them to this place. And that's why I think it's important to recognize that it is a real thing and it affects how people think, even if it's not morally loaded.
Yeah, and even if we can't really define it properly. It's hard. It is a loose term. I mean, ethnicity. What is this? Okay, you've got French in you, right? Do you speak French? See, and I do, right? And I lived in France for 3 years, so I am culturally much more French than you are, despite having no ethnicity. And I probably have more, or at least as much, loyalty to France as you might do. I certainly do to Argentina because I lived there. So we're talking about. I suppose you're adding together. In nature and nurture to an extent. So I am accepting there is something in what you're saying about ethnicity, but I would rather we focus more on culture. I think it's more important.
I think it's the one precedes the other in many people's minds, because not very many cultures are as individual as the Christian cultures of like Northwest Europe, where we've been raised, and so lots of them are quite clannish and very ethnic based. I think the Israelis actually get this sort of thing right, is they recognize that the Jews are a people, they therefore need a home to protect themselves, and they recognize that practicing their religion is what gives them a moral guiding star to keep their nation together. And so that's why when October the 7th happened, there was no question why so many young people went up and joined the IDF and defended themselves against Hamas. I would like the same sort of spirit for England, sort of like Zionism for the English. I'd like that for lots of, Zionism for the Japanese, so to sense, because their birth rates in the doldrums. I think that's sort of a binding mechanism. Even, again, if it's not moral, it allows you to recognize yourself as a nation, a people, a set of families, a congregation, and so you can come together around that shared culture and then defend it when it's under attack. Does that sound plausible?
It does, actually. And look, Israel has one of the highest birth rates in the world. And I long thought that was because of the Hasidics. But actually, the Hasidic rate is going down a little bit. It's the secular Jews feel very nationalistic and like they have a duty to produce more Jews. Now, it hasn't been going very well. There's about 10 of us in the world, and we're trying, but not getting there. I suppose a difference would be, and it's not that you're wrong here. I do agree with that. I think a difference is that the Jews have for so long been persecuted. Now, you could argue in a different kind of way, England's going that way, where being English, you might be persecuted. Being white, you might be persecuted. So this is an issue. So I can see why you might move there. What I don't like, and I know you can say, well, if you don't like it, doesn't mean it's not true, but I think with these issues, these are so ambiguous and difficult. I don't like the fixation on this. I don't like the idea that Rishi Sunak is not English. But he's not Anglo-Saxon. So, yeah, I don't think we need to conflate those words.
Well, it's just a fact. It's a fact claim. I'm not saying anything bad about Rishi Sunak because of that. I'm saying it's a fact claim that
Two words. Are they just synonyms? Are you just saying that Anglo-Saxon and English are synonyms?
Anglo-Saxon and English are synonyms, yes, but British.
Because when we say English for ethnicity, the reason for that is because there are two Englishes. There's English as in nationality. Your nationality is English, right? And Rishi's nationality is English. So it feels like when we're saying ethnicity...
His nationality is British, and English nationality hasn't existed since the 1700s.
Right. Well, that's a good point then. Well, you've got me there. I mean, this is why I don't have these views set in stone. I'm always having to debate them and speak with you about them. There is still an English culture around the English football team, around Englishness, around what Catherine Burble-Singh is doing at Michaela's school, mostly Muslim country, who she insists. I think they might, well, no, they don't pray, but they watch the England football games together. They do loads of English things together. And I think you said yourself, when somebody is told that they're not part of something, they're less likely to adapt to it. One of the issues we have right now, okay, yes, we can get Farage in and say, let's stop this immigration, but we're already we're way beyond that. And the birth rate of different ethnicities, let's say, is way higher than ours. So we're completely screwed. And I think one thing we need to do is, I think we're screwed, but I'm a very negative person. One thing I think we need to do is adapt. And get people adapting. And by going around saying, yeah, but you're not English and you can never be that, I don't think it's helpful when we could use the word Anglo-Saxon and people will understand it better and go, well, no, I'm not Anglo-Saxon, but I'm very much part of this English culture and I want to be.
This is why I think tribalism, and I'll conclude here because I can see our other people hovering. This is why I think tribalism's a...
Thousands of people.
I think tribalism is useful because I would consider you or Ayan Hassi Ali my kinsman, my tribesman, because we share, with myself and Ayan, the same religion, at least the same principles here. You know, I would invite you to my wedding, for example. I would, yeah. Oh, you can come if you want. Yeah. Well, you know, we share a country together, we share a common culture, etc. And so those are the ties that bind. And over time, if families intermarry, then those ethnic lines become blurred. But till then, your neighbours, your friends, your kin in the sense of a bond of loyalty, if not by blood, but by mutual respect. And I think that works. I think that's what they're trying to do with British identity. I think the problem is they're far too woolly values. And I think, again, lots of people don't want to buy in the first place. As for the idea of being doomed, well, lots of people are only here because DEI legislation gives them special privileges in law. We agree we should remove those. Lots of subsidies keep people in the country through social housing and welfare and benefits. Lots of people who wouldn't be able to pay their own way would otherwise go home. And I think if you asserted a robust culture, the kind of thing that we both agree with, then you wouldn't get all the Islamists here lurking about, hoping that Dawa would make them ascendant. So far be it from me to be the optimist in the conversation, but maybe we're not as doomed as we thought.
It's the numbers. And you and I discussed last night, we don't entirely know those numbers. And the numbers of people who hate this country, who live in it, that is why I'm negative. I do a podcast every week, as you do. We do these things to try and fight it. Because sometimes when I say I'm negative, people say, "Oh, you just want to jump ship or whatever." Because I applied for a passport in Argentina. I can't even get it at the moment. But that's in case it gets to a point where they are rounding up.
Can you get a passport in Israel?
I don't know. Probably, from what I always heard, because you have to do some sort of service, which I think is, what a brilliant concept that is. You come to England, for example, you've got to fight in our armed forces or some such thing I like that. Now, I didn't think about that, but I quite like that. And would I do that in Israel? Am I brave enough to do some sort? You can do some sort of community service for nebbish idiots like me. It's a funny thing with the Jews, because the Jews, you think of your Woody Allens and all of that, your little nebbish kind of, I've always got mouth ulcers or whatever. I'm always moaning about my health and all that, pathetic. Yet the Israeli army, these are big, burly guys, and I'm very proud of them. But I think I could potentially do that. I don't speak the language. I don't know the culture. I don't really feel very, they will be talking in this weird language. I want to be in England, and I want England to triumph. This is my home. It's been my family's home for 150 years at least. We don't even know before that. I love this country. I love the football team. I know I keep going back to that. So we need to persevere. We need to help the ones who are here to adapt. And that's going to be, we have to be serious. No more diversity is our strength. Nonsense. Horrible. Make people adapt, whether that's to Christianity or something we set out that is, this is England. Come and enjoy this country if you want to be part of it and really towards it. That's what we need.
All right, you can stay. Pleasure as always.